Hello and welcome, I'm Jeff Gerstmann, and welcome to our first live video review for Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence for the PlayStation 2. Today we're going to be talking to the reviewer, Greg Kasavin, who's also our site director, and we're also going to be taking questions from you, the viewer. Let's get started with a little intro from Greg. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the game and get us started?
Yeah, well, the good news is Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence is above all just an outstanding PlayStation 2 action-adventure game. It's of course based on the game that first came out in 2004, but it turns out to be just a lot more than that because they took the 2004 game, which many people still hold near and dear as one of the best PS2 games out there. They added a pretty fundamental change to the way that game plays, and then just lumped a whole bunch of other really cool stuff on top of it, most notably being this online mode, which is like a whole separate game. In fact, it's on its own separate disc and everything. It kind of reuses some of the characters and mechanics from Metal Gear Solid 3, but it's its own online game with 5 different modes of play, and it's really cool in itself. It's a totally new experience for Metal Gear fans because if you've been a fan of the Metal Gear series for a while, you're not a fan of it because you've had any kind of multiplayer experiences. This is really the first time that there's a competitive aspect to the game, but it's a really great start for what's probably going to become a staple of the series going forward, and it's also just a really fun component of the game. And then even on top of that, there are all these other new extras which are really solid and just bring out a lot of the best aspects of the game even more so, because you can now go back and fight a lot of the bosses out of order and just under special conditions and get the most out of the best action sequences from the game. And you can also just watch the cutscenes in any order and even see some of the funniest parts of the game. There are these parody videos that are just really fun to look at and just help you to understand the crazy sense of humor that this series has. Kind of for all the seriousness of the main storyline, there's really this underlying sense of humor, this kind of charming style to it that is totally unique to Metal Gear, and that just comes through better than ever before in this package. On top of all that, it's at a discount price. You can't say no to that. So even if you already plunked down for the original Metal Gear Solid 3, I think there's plenty here to get you to come back.
Okay. Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, why don't we start with what's different? I mean, they have made some substantial changes. It seems like the most dramatic change made in the single-player portion of the game is the camera. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the camera is really the only difference to the core game. They took the 2004 game and added a new default camera control to it. So whereas before you ran around kind of from this top-down overhead view, now you have a full kind of third-person camera, which you could rotate using the right analog stick. We could actually dive right in and show a bit of it now. It's not a different camera from what you're getting in a lot of other games out there, and yet it has a pretty profound difference to Metal Gear, especially in how it interacts with the first-person viewpoint and aiming. That's still a big part of the series. So you can basically not only does this make the whole game easier to control and just have a more natural feel to it, but it even makes the aiming feel better. It makes the whole game even look better because you're always looking at a closer view in on Snake, the main character, and just the outstanding detail in the character model just comes across that much better.
So it sounds pretty dramatic.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's not dramatic if you take it out of context and just kind of look at it, but it's reason enough, as mentioned in the text review, it's reason enough to go back in and play through the whole game again and just feel like it's a pretty different experience. So here it is in practice. Here's the regular camera. Here's how the old Metal Gear Solid was. Here's me messing around with the right analog stick. But if I press in on the right analog stick, now I switch to the new default camera, and that's what the right analog stick does now. So I can do stuff like this now and see
kind of
enemies coming around.
Corners and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. It just gives you more tactical awareness, and like I said, it just even looks better because this is how it is before. You're just looking at the top of Snake's head. But as you can see, the graphics in this game still really stand out. I mean, it's one of the best looking PS2 games around. And when you're running around like this, it's just that much more natural to then switch to a first-person viewpoint and aim and shoot that way.
Cool. Well, why don't we get right into questions from our viewers out there? Remember, keep on sending those in, and we're going to get to them. Our first question comes from Don in California. A question about the multiplayer. Wants to know, how balanced are the commanders? Some of the characters from the story appear in the multiplayer. Are they balanced in there? How does that operate?
They are balanced. Basically, you can play as one of 3 factions in the multiplayer, and each of the factions has a different leader character. So for example, Ocelot is the leader of the Ocelot unit, the guys in kind of the black hoods with the red berets.
Right.
Like Ocelot's special ability, if you're like the highest ranked player on that team, you could play as Ocelot, and he has his like reflective gunshots, so you could bounce your shots around corners. So that's something that's really going to take a lot of skill to use. So it's not going to give you necessarily a huge advantage. So these characters, they stand out on the battlefield, and they make the online play like look more interesting as opposed to just having these cookie cutter characters running around. But they don't seem to like necessarily just put a huge advantage into the hands of the guy who's already the best in the match. The online, your mileage is going to vary, as with any online game, but I haven't experienced any imbalances or anything like that. I've just experienced a lot of people having fun with all the different match types. Essentially, there are these 5 match types, and just to experience the game in kind of a real-world setting, I've been playing on the Japanese servers with a lot of Japanese players who are there during all hours, and it's just a lot of exciting matches. It's got a good balance of pure action and just kind of tension and a tactical feel to it. You could die really quickly, but at the same time you could do cool stuff like hide in cardboard boxes. Throw a dirty magazine in the middle of a bunch of guys and watch as they automatically gawk at it, so you could then plug them in the head.
So now, how does that work? Does it actually force the other human players to stop and,
pretty much
look at it for a couple seconds?
Although one of the special characters who is based on Raiden from Metal Gear Solid 2, he is somehow immune to the guiles of these strange naughty magazines.
Weird.
The naughty magazine actually works basically like a grenade. It's just kind of... It's one of the ways in which this game injects this kind of weird tongue-in-cheek humor into what's otherwise this like really authentic-looking military setting. And you'll see these other little hints at that in the online play. Like one of the modes is basically capture the frog. So you've got these guys running around with machine guns and AK-47s and what have you, but there's this crazy little frog doll that you have to pick up and run back to your base with. And another mode has a little ducky that like... it's like a little rubber ducky, and one team has to defend the ducky, and the other team has to go and get the ducky. So it's hard to understand if you've never played Metal Gear before, but again, I feel like Subsistence does a better job of making this sense of humor understandable in the context of the game the more you play it.
A little more balanced that way.
Yeah, and especially once you get into like some of the secret theater stuff where it has all these parody videos that remix a lot of the key cutscenes from the game. They just took the time to take some of the coolest cutscenes from Metal Gear Solid 3 and totally redo them in a completely insane way, in some cases with new dialogue and just different characters that have no bearing on any of it. So it's got this self-deprecating humor to it that pokes a lot of fun at itself. It's like you can clearly see that these guys are aware of the points of criticism that have been leveled at Metal Gear in the past. And
cool.
You see that manifest itself both in the gameplay, like with the new camera, and also just with some of this fan service parody stuff.
Let's go back to the questions here. Now, as far as like the front end goes, we have a question from Tim in Altamont IL, who wants to know, what can we expect with the online portion in regards to clan support and buddy lists? I mean, in addition to that, like how does the whole front end work for player matching and stuff like that?
The front end works quite well. It has a buddy list. It also has a blacklist for people you don't want to play with. I don't think it has clan support, but it does have this lobby-based system, including like a beginner's lobby where you could just jump in there, hit a quick match, and dive right into your mode of choice. So you could say, sneaking mission, that's the one where one player is Snake and the rest of the players are trying to hunt him down. You could say, I want a quick play sneaking mission, and it'll throw you into a game really quickly. You have to set up an account. It's tied to stats tracking and stuff like that. But that's all quite quick and painless. I found it to be quite painless and easy to get into. And I, even when playing against people in Japan, I haven't really run into lag, even playing over a DSL line. It seems well optimized and all that kind of stuff. Solid code.
Cool. Josh Montgomery from Little Rock, Arkansas wants to know how many modes are there in MGS3, and is there any customizing your character? I think we covered
Referring
a lot of the
to
mode
online,
stuff.
yes.
But yeah, can you customize your character online? How does that work?
So there are 5 different modes, and you can't really customize your character, though there are these special characters that you get, and they're the 3 different factions. The 3 different factions are just a cosmetic difference, and they correspond to the different factions that you run into during the single-player game.
Okay. Patrick from, we're going to say Czechoslovakia here, says, I'd like to know if it's possible to use saves from the original MGS3 in the new Subsistence version. Does any of that stuff carry over?
I don't think that it does. I had a save on this here memory card, and I don't think it carried over. But one of the things it does do, which I note in the review, is that as soon as you have save data in Subsistence, it unlocks like all the cutscenes right off the bat. So you don't need to have finished the game to get at all the content right away.
Cool.
Which is cool if you're familiar with the game, but might not be cool if you're a first-time player, because you could be tempted into spoiling the whole plot for yourself by just running around and looking at cutscenes.
Right.
So.
Eric from New York asks, is there a 2-player option in the multiplayer? Is all the multiplayer online? Is there any kind of offline multiplayer?
It is all online multiplayer. There isn't offline multiplayer.
Okay.
Yeah. There's no... It has these other... There are these other bonus games in there. You could play the original Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2 for the MSX, which are Japanese computer systems.
And in fact, Scott from California wants to know how well are the new English translations done?
They're done quite well. These games have never been officially translated into English in this form, as far as I know. A lot of us know the original Metal Gear game for the Nintendo Entertainment System, but this is actually the MSX version. You could see the difference right off the bat. Like, you get out of water and there are these big tanks out there. It's like a different first scene than the original NES game. Apparently they're based in part on, there's some updates in there. They're based in part on Japanese mobile phone versions of these games. So in Metal Gear 2, you actually see like contemporary looking character art, like Snake has his bandana and looks like Snake as we know him today, stuff like that. So I think one of the really neat things about the inclusion of these 2 games is that it ties the whole story together, because the Metal Gear Solid 3 is basically the origin story of the Metal Gear series, and then the original Metal Gear game kind of follows suit from that, where Big Boss, the character from Metal Gear Solid 3, is actually giving Solid Snake his orders. So it all kind of ties together that way. You start to get a feel for what
how
the story
it all goes.
is. Yeah,
Okay.
how it all began and how it all fits together.
Cool. Edward from Toronto wants to know, is the 8-player for multiplayer enough? Do the maps feel too big? Are the maps the right size for the player count?
The maps really feel just right. They're designed for 8 players, so there's a good fit to them where they feel tight, but they're not crowded. So you often get that problem when like games are handed down, say from the PC to the PlayStation 2 or something, where a map that was originally designed for 16 players, you've only got 8 players in there and it feels too big. These maps do vary in size, but it seems like there's always going to be someone around the next corner, and yet there's not going to be a big crowd in front of you. So again, it just all contributes to that tactical feel where there are different entry points and exit points all around. You could climb under stuff, climb up high so that people can't to get like a good sniping angle at people, all kinds of stuff like that. And there aren't, kind of those dull moments where you're just waiting for something to happen. It seems like someone's always coming around the corner.
Okay, cool. Let's talk a little bit about the limited edition version. Now it's available. There are 2 versions of it. The main version's $30, but then there's an additional $40 version.
Yeah.
And Ronald in LA wants to know, if you can elaborate a little more on what's included in that limited edition version.
The only difference between the limited edition version and the standard edition version is $10 difference in price, and the inclusion of a third disc called Existence, which is essentially a movie. It plays in your PS2, and it's just a non-interactive movie of all the Metal Gear Solid 3 cutscenes spliced together, and what you're seeing here is not one of them. This is actually one of the parody videos, again, just poking fun of the much maligned Raiden character from Metal Gear Solid 2. So the third disc, it's pretty cool because you could just throw it in there and watch this big, huge movie. You know, people have often said Hideo Kojima, the designer of Metal Gear, he ought to make a movie because he makes these really cool cutscenes.
Sure.
Well, now he's gone and done it. But you're not really missing that much if you don't get this limited edition, because you've still got the demo theater as part of Subsistence, so you could watch any of the cutscenes that you want to see.
Now, does it treat it as a DVD? Victor in New Jersey wants to know if there's any controller interaction on the third disc.
You can.
Can you hit R1 when Naked Snake hesitates at shaking the president's hand and stuff like that?
I don't think you can interact with it, but you do have like a chapter. You have a chapter select, so you don't have to just watch it start to finish.
Okay. Now, is it actually like a full-on PS2 disc, or is it just treating it like it's a DVD?
I think it is a PS2 disc and not a DVD that you could play in your DVD player.
Okay. Ivan in British Columbia wants to know if he doesn't have online and he has Snake Eater already.
Yeah. Is it still
worth getting?
That all depends. Basically, that all depends on how much you want to play this game again with a better camera. I do strongly believe that the new default camera perspective makes this a better game. It's just more enjoyable to play now. And the new extras that aren't the online, the new boss battle stuff, the new Snake versus Monkey missions, and the secret theater and stuff like that, these are substantial extras. So even if you don't play the online, it can still be worth it, especially for $30. But if you ignore the online, you're ignoring a huge aspect of what makes this such a cool package, and more than just kind of a rehash or a reissue of the original game. So if you're not interested in the online at all, it's hard to say. It comes down to a pretty personal decision as to how much you want to play through the original game again. But I do think, to reiterate, I do think it's worth replaying Metal Gear Solid 3 again just for this camera angle. I loved playing it through, an additional time.
Cool. Let's turn back to the online. A lot of people interested in the online. I mean, it's all new. Juan in Iowa wants to know, can you change camouflage outfits when playing a Snake in online mode? And then I guess my follow-up is, how does that work online with camouflage? Do you just become invisible? Or what?
You have some characters, including Snake in the sneaking mission mode, have access to the stealth camouflage, which is that Predator-style effect that makes you almost invisible, but you'll sometimes see like a crackle of electricity that can give you away, and as Snake, once you've picked up the little microfilm that you're trying to retrieve and get to an exit, characters can see that kind of floating over your head and spot you that way. But as far as like going into a start menu and curing, digging out bullet wounds and changing camouflage, that does not come into play in the online. However, the visually camouflage does take effect. You do have like the low foliage and things like that, and you could absolutely act like a sniper in this game and duck down into the grass and have your sniper rifle sticking out and be picking guys off and basically using the visual aspects of the game, the way that your character is naturally wearing camouflage to blend in with the environment.
Cool. John in New York wants to know, does the online mode play like the single-player game? Because you have inventory controls and all that stuff. Is all that there?
It's interesting because it does and it doesn't. So having finished the single player of Metal Gear Solid 3, you could then dive into the online and realize you're in a whole new world. It's got a whole new learning curve, and actually one of my slight knocks against this game is that the manual that comes with a package doesn't do a very good job of helping you get your bearings in the online. But the same core mechanics apply. The way the camera works, switching weapons and items, that's all the same, and you could even use your close quarters combat to like drop the guy and plug him in the head. But there's a whole different feel to the action since there's much more kind of lethality in the online play. You could die a lot faster if someone just plugs you in the head. So the online play is like, imagine if you were playing as one of the grunts that you were killing in droves in the single-player game. That's kind of what it feels like to be playing the online.
Great. All right. Nathan in Alberta asks, Is there more camouflage in this version than there was in the original? And can you still download the camo that was available for the original?
There is the download camouflage option, and yes, there is more camouflage right on the disc. We actually cycled through that a little earlier.
Yeah.
It's all kind of silly, but you could see Snake with a big Japanese flag on his face and things like that. It has no real bearing on gameplay, but it's just kind of fun to look at, and it applies in the single-player cutscenes. So again, if you want to add like a ridiculous element to the game, you could be going around with a big Italian flag or like something like that on your face and having these really serious discussions where Snake is talking to Ocelot and what have you.
Nice. Has the script from the MSX version of Metal Gear 2 been rewritten or improved on? I mean, it's been translated, so it's kind of this is the first time.
I can't say I'm familiar with the original MSX version of the game, but it has been. This script has been translated, and it's coherent. It doesn't read like an old Nintendo game from the 80s where you're
it's just
digging
all busted
through botched,
up.
Botched.
How are the
translation or
response
anything.
times on the MSX versions of the game? Pretty clean. The
Yeah,
ports
they
feel
play,
right. The emulation feels
they
fine.
play just fine. Yeah, it plays like an old Nintendo game where basically it feels like a very clean port. These games don't necessarily hold up great. I mean, as you can see here, they are lacking a lot as far as the presentation quality that we've come to expect from Metal Gear Solid.
And even the movement quality, just the quality of movement and animation, just seems like it's a step below the NES. And the MSX, not a very powerful. Powerful in its day, I guess.
Yeah, actually, they're definitely better than the NES version.
Okay.
There's a lot of really cool stuff, in particular in Metal Gear 2. Metal Gear 2 is the game where you start to get a feel for where the series was going. Like, as you could see here, you could crawl through gratings and you could punch a wall and guys will hear you. And you sound an alarm, if you make too much noise.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of the elements that later became part and parcel with Metal Gear Solid are evident in these games. So it's just, above all, it's great to have them as part of the package to give you a sense of where the series came from and kind of let you understand that it's held true to certain principles, even as the presentation quality has just gotten better and better over the years.
Cool. John in Ohio is obviously taken the HD TV plunge, wants to know if the game has widescreen support and 480p support.
No, I don't believe so. A lot of the cutscenes are all letterboxed automatically with the subtitles enabled by default.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that this is just speculation, but with how good this game looks and how hard it's probably pushing the PlayStation 2, they're probably doing all they can to kind of limit the amount of stuff that happens on the screen just to make sure that there's a good frame rate and a high level of detail in what's being displayed.
Mm-hmm. Matt from Texas has a question that I don't think we have the answer to, but I think it's probably worth saying anyway. Is there any chance that this will come to the Xbox like Substance did? I mean, this isn't the first time that they've released an updated version of a Metal Gear game.
Right.
But the last time it was on the Xbox.
Indeed. There's no version of Metal Gear Solid 3 on the Xbox yet, and Konami hasn't made any announcements to that effect. I don't know if they're locked into Sony's platforms, what with Metal Gear Solid 4 and all that. A lot of what they've been saying around that game, they kind of make a joke about the cell processor. So maybe they're in cahoots with Sony platforms at this point, but you never know. I never would have guessed that certain games came to other platforms that did.
Yeah.
So here's hoping. If you want it for the Xbox, then just kind of rattle as many cages as you can, post to message boards, and maybe the powers that be will take notice.
Though that said, I think I remember them saying that with the team so deeply entrenched in MGS4 development that they didn't want to spend the time to put it out on the Xbox this time around, since it was already on the PS2. Real easy to just kind of add the camera and tweak that stuff and do it, I guess.
Yep.
Right? Okay. Victor, New Jersey asks, is replaying the original Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, is it easy to jump into, or is the game aged badly?
They have definitely aged. They're easy to pick up and play because all you could do at first is walk around and punch. And the basic controls also still apply as far as equipping weapons and using rations to recover health and things like that. But the games are a little bit... you'll realize from playing these games how much of a better job games today do as far as giving you instruction on what you're actually supposed to be doing, because you'll just kind of be walking around not sure what to do. You have to use your radio to get your orders on what to do next and stuff like that. These games are actually hard too. You could die easy. Metal Gear 2 in particular, it's got really tough bosses in it, stuff like that. So
Cool.
I think fans are gonna really, again, they're gonna like it, but as far as this being like a major gameplay attraction, not necessarily.
Are they lengthy games? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, they're games where you could get stuck for a long period of time.
Right.
I'm sure you could do a speed run of one of these games in a very short period of time, but they're kind of like, say, the old Metroid, where if you don't know what you're doing, it can take you hours and hours.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Alan in Great Britain wants to know: are player names always shown above players' heads online? That's a good question. That's one that I had after seeing it. It seems like that can give away someone who's hidden, or if you can see a life bar or a player name above their head. How's that work?
I don't think you see. I don't know that you could toggle that off. I don't think you. It might even depend on the mode to a certain extent. Not positive.
Like which ones show? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you like as in similar games. It's easier to identify your teammates than it is your adversaries. So your adversaries are the guys who don't have a big "this guy's on your team" sign over his head.
Cool.
Their names come up when you're kind of pointing and shooting at them.
All right. Billy Monks from Virginia wants to know: can you toggle friendly fire for games, or how? I mean, is it on all the time, or how does that work?
I think you might be able to toggle that when you set up a match. There's definitely a concept of friendly fire. The game gives you a warning when you start shooting at one of your own guys, and I think it deals less damage than when you're getting hit by an enemy. So there's definitely, the game discourages you from blasting your own teammates, and you could blacklist people you don't want to play with, things like that. It also keeps stats, like a very elaborate stats for everybody. So if someone is being an abusive player, they can get kind of blacklisted by the entire community, and that be that.
All right. Henrik from Sweden wants to know: have the guns in Subsistence been changed, or have any guns been added? Any new weaponry there?
There actually is at least one new weapon that's available, which is the flamethrower. You faced it in Metal Gear Solid 3 when you fought the Fury, who's one of the bosses, but now you could actually use the flamethrower in multiplayer. And it's kind of a weird, crazy weapon because it just shoots these big, billowing clouds of fire. It's not just kind of a stream of fire as you see in other games like this. But I would say, like, it doesn't necessarily add like much in the way of new weapons, but this game makes the weapons that you have available much more accessible. Because again, everything from the duel mode where you're fighting against bosses, you get to use a lot of the weapons that get downplayed in the main single-player game in more contexts, and also in the online play. So it feels like they're new weapons, but that's mostly because there are a bunch of weapons in Metal Gear Solid 3, the original version, that you didn't really get to use very much at all unless you went out of your way to, get the rocket launcher and fire at regular enemies with it, things like that.
Cool.
Now you could use the rocket launcher against like the earlier bosses in the game, whereas normally you'd get that weapon very late. Nice.
Matthew asks, what happens when you die online? Do you become a ghost?
Depends on the mode. In one of the modes, you do become a ghost. So only the rescue mission is it set up so that if you die, you sit out for the rest of the round. So that's kind of the Counter-Strike style one. In some of the other modes, what you're trying to do is make the opposing side run out of life tickets. So you respawn almost right away, but every time you kill a guy on the enemy team, it's kind of chipping away at their score, and like the first team to make the enemy die the most often is the one that wins. So it's well implemented depending on the mode, but apart from rescue mission, you don't have to sit out for very long at all.
Cool. Don asks, how reliable is the cardboard box in multiplayer, since everyone knows you can hide under it? That's. I mean, if there's just a cardboard box sitting there, wouldn't you just walk up and just shoot every box you see?
So the cardboard box, again, a real staple of the Metal Gear series, and they've applied it really well to online play. Because you can hide in a cardboard box and kind of walk around and try to sneak up on your opponents and drop them down, shoot them in the head. But it's not that simple, because if you see a cardboard box walking around, it's very easy to shoot. And there are other cardboard boxes lying around that don't have anybody in them. So if you waste your time just shooting every cardboard box that gets in the way, you're going to give away your position. People are going to hear your gun. And again, these maps are small enough to where there might be someone around the next corner. If you waste your time shooting at a box, you're just wasting your time. So it's one of the cool features of this. It seems to be balanced really well. And in fact, it seems a lot more useful in the online multiplayer than it does in the single player. I mean, I think in the single player Metal Gear Solid 3, the cardboard box is one of those kind of funny, gimmicky features that you totally don't need. But in the online play, you do see a lot of people using this, but not abusing it by any means.
Cool. All right, one last question. I have to know the answer to this. John in Jersey wants to know: can you choke enemies online?
You cannot. You can drop them to the ground. You can't slit their throats. I don't think you can choke them either. So the close quarters combat, it's not the same as when Snake uses his dirty moves in the single player game. But what you can absolutely do is grab the guy, throw him down, make him so that he's prone and defenseless, and shoot him in the head. That seems
Since
to
we're talking
work
about
quite
CQC,
well.
there was one more thing that came up. Is there any kind of counter system for that online? Can you counter CQC?
The counter
moves?
system is you shoot the guy in the face before he gets close enough to you to
That's
throw
a pretty
you down.
good counter system.
It seems well balanced in online because a gun has the advantage of range. So if the guy is, unless the guy really gets the drop on you, runs up on you from behind, or gets you as you're coming around the corner, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting close to someone who's aiming at you, because you're going to die really quickly, especially if the guy shoots you in the head, but really no matter what.
Cool. All right. Well, I mean, let's sum it up. I mean, from the sounds of things, this sounds like it is a amazing value. It's a budget price package, not the full $20, but $30 is still very cheap for games,
right.
With a whole lot to it. Why don't you sum it up for us? So let's talk about it.
I mean, look, it's already one of the best kind of cinematic experiences and stories that you could find on the PlayStation 2. It maybe gets off to kind of a slow start, but boy, those last few hours of this game are just totally incredible, and it's got some amazing characters, some amazing plot points, still some of the best graphics and sound and overall presentation. So even just the underlying game itself, it's aged very well. It's definitely more fun to play now that it's got a better camera system. And now that the game's got a ton of these extras on top of everything that are really, they're not just these throwaway extras, they're actually well worth your while. And there are some really good interactive ones, like the original Metal Gear games, and also like the Snake versus Monkey stuff in the dual mode, and some really cool non-interactive ones like the parody cutscenes and the demo theater and all that. So this is the total package. I mean, if it's possible to criticize the Metal Gear Solid for being kind of single player only, now you can't do that because it's got really good online in there as well, which is you could put this online right up against any kind of similar competitive shooter experience on the PS2, but it does a really good job of tying in Metal Gear style play mechanics along with the conventions of multiplayer shooters. So it's kind of got something for everyone. So unless you're squeamish and can't take the crazy story, can't take the blood, that kind of stuff, there's really no reason to miss out on this game. It's really a one-of-a-kind experience. It's got a weird story and a weird sense of humor to it, but it's something that commands the loyal following of so many people, and really with good reason.
Cool. All right, Greg, thanks a lot.
Thank you. And, thanks to all of you for your questions.
Thanks to everyone out there for questions. And we have the chat room open. We'll leave that open for a little while longer, and we'll be in there chopping it up. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again real soon.